Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is a very, very serious video. This is breaking news. This is breaking news. This just in. One of the biggest race hustlers on TV and on social media and just in our society as a whole, the biggest race hustler is white. Yes, you heard it here first. Sunny Hostin, one of the biggest race hustlers on The View, constantly complaining and talking about race 24/7, 7 days a week, especially about reparations. Turns out when she went to Finding Your Roots, which is a ancestry-based television show where they dig into your genetic makeup and your family history, turns out Sunny has a whole lot of Spanish blood running through her veins as a Puerto Rican. I'm shocked. So I came across this video actually last night. I did a short about it last night because it was just too funny not to talk about it. Check out this video of Sunny Hostin of The View finding out on Finding Your Roots that her ancestors were white.
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
But I knew I wanted to do a full video just diving into this topic and into this situation because there is just so much irony packed into this story and associated with this woman that I just had to do a full video about it because how could I not? So Sunny went on the show, Finding Your Roots. I'm assuming sometime earlier last year or maybe mid last year, I don't know. But she went on the show, did her family history, and then did a segment on The View revealing her family history. And the surprise and shock on her face was both comical and also shocking to me because if you are a Latino person, specifically a Puerto Rican person, and you don't know that majority of Puerto Ricans have a large percentage of Spaniard blood in them, where have you been? Where have you been? But rather than me talking about this, how about I just show you the video of Sunny realizing that her whole entire pro-black, pro-BLM, pro-reparations, pro-I can't stand white people perspective and narrative, well, it's not as strong as she thought it was because it turns out she's got some explaining to do and some checks to write. All right, let's watch this segment together and try not to pull our hair out because it's The View.
We're starting a little differently this morning. Sunny, you were just on an episode of Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates Jr.
Was.
Yeah.
And he gave me some surprising revelations about my family history. I was really reluctant. I don't know how you felt when you did it, Whoopi, but I was really reluctant to do it because I just sensed that there could be something in my family history that would be disappointing.
Negative.
Negative, yes. I thought I was going to have that kind of moment. And Skip had asked me to do it for a long time, and I finally decided to do it because I thought it'd be helpful.
I'm going to just break in for a second and say that her perspective of having negative news, probably going to assume she means having any white blood in her. Let's just keep it real. Carry on.
For my children and my children's children to know what their real history was, But what I found out was that my mother's family, while they are Puerto Rican, they actually originate from Spain. And the reason that they moved to Puerto Rico is because the slave trade had been sort of canceled in Spain and then Curacao, and then they moved all of their slaves to Puerto Rico. And so the family business, I had been told that they were printers and journalists, but they were in fact enslavers. And my mother, so
A hush fell over the
it
audience.
was deeply disappointing. And it's deeply disappointing because my mother really identified as Puerto Rican. She was part of the civil rights movement, and she was deeply ingrained in Black culture, and identified herself as Black for race, but Hispanic for ethnicity.
Okay.
But her race is white. She's European.
Yeah.
I know. It's
Yeah.
weird because when you look at her, my mother's blonde and she has light eyes, and my whole family looks like that. So I think inside, I sort of knew that this was my history, and that's probably why I didn't want to do it. And I spoke to my mom about it. She was deeply disappointed. She actually cried about it. And then she said, maybe that's why I have been so connected to Black culture, because it's an atonement in my spirit. And I received that. I also found out that, and there were slaves on both sides of our family, mothers and fathers, but we are 7% indigenous Puerto Rican, Taino, so I'm proud of that. And then I also found out about my father's family, his family, all slaves. You know, they say in Puerto Rico, the blood calls you. And voting is so important to me. You know, you guys know I go to voter drives. I drive seniors to voting polls. I've never missed a vote. My family thinks it's crazy. I'll vote for anything. Local something, constable, I'm there. And I think I get that from my ancestors. I really do. I think you carry your ancestors with you. So it was really eye-opening.
You carry your ancestors with you, except the white ones, right?
I hope that they still let me host the Puerto Rican Day Parade.
Well, you have a little bit still left in there, right? Is there no Puerto Rican in there at all?
No, I have 7%.
There's 7%.
It's
Which is not.
7% indigenous. But the thing about Puerto Rico is Puerto Ricans are Spanish.
All right, before we go on to the breakdown of Puerto Ricans, the fact that she's saying, like, oh, I don't know if they're going to let me host the Puerto Rican Day Parade anymore. Does she not know? Is she really this ignorant? Does she not know that being Puerto Rican, as I am myself, is not a race? It is a ethnicity, also a nationality. So just like being American isn't a race, right? You can be a Black American, an Asian American, Hispanic American, a white American. The term American is a blanket statement that describes many different diverse ethnicities within that umbrella. Puerto Rico is no different. Majority of Puerto Ricans are mixed people, triracial, with Native American, which is indigenous Puerto Rican, European, majority Spaniard or Portuguese, and African blood. That's our makeup. And the average Puerto Rican is literally about 65+% European. That's just a fact. So the fact that she is shocked that her Puerto Rican blood contains European blood, specifically from Spain, is just mind-boggling to me. Like, how are you just finding this out? Like, and how are people in this day and age still shocked not to see like a nationality on their genetic makeup? Most nationalities in Latin America are not going to show up on your ancestry data because those nationalities are umbrella terms for other races. It's just how it works. So yeah, it's shocking to me, but it's not shocking because it's the View and they're incredibly stupid. But I still was expecting a little bit more, just a little bit.
Spanish, they're Native American, and they're African. Right. And so my family just happens to have more of the
you know,
Sunny, how does this
conquerors.
change you, though? You mentioned your mom was upset and this was shocking and maybe deep down you kind of resisted it. How has this changed you, knowing what you're hearing now?
You know, I think at first I was deeply disappointed.
The slave thing is a bummer.
It's a bummer. And
she can control it.
I still believe, I still believe in reparations, by the way, so y'all can stop texting me.
Okay, before we even go on with that, are they not aware? Are they not aware of how the African slave trade worked back then? Do they think that Europeans came onto the continent of Africa and just forcefully took slaves? Is that what they actually think? Because shockingly, that's not how the slave trade worked. The reason why the slave trade was so successful at its time is because there were African tribes that were already enslaving other African tribes. And then when the Europeans came, they said, hey, this could be even more profitable. We can trade with the Europeans for spices, for weapons, for gold, and in return, give them our slaves. That's why the slave trade was so successful. In fact, majority of Europeans never left the coast of Africa because genetically they were not able to sustain the environment of Africa and the natural diseases that people may have had. Their bodies, their immune systems couldn't fight against that. So most Europeans actually stayed on the coast where the water was and waited for the African tribes to bring the slaves to them.
Slavery was not unique to Africa or Africans, but was in fact common on every inhabited continent for thousands of years. As recently as the 18th century, it existed in Eastern Europe, and it continued to exist in the Middle East after the Second World War. What was unusual about Africa was the magnitude of the trade in human beings within recent centuries. Within Africa itself, slaves were used for a wide variety of tasks and under a wide variety of social arrangements. Inland tribes such as the Igbo were regularly raided by their more powerful coastal neighbors, and the captives led away to be sold as slaves. European merchants who came to buy slaves in West Africa were confined by rulers in these countries to a few coastal ports, where Africans could bring slaves and trade as a cartel in order to get higher prices. Hundreds of miles farther south, in the Portuguese colony of Angola, hundreds of thousands of Africans likewise carried out the initial captures, enslavement, and slave trading processes, funneling the slaves into the major marketplaces where the Portuguese took charge of them and shipped them off to Brazil. Most of the slaves shipped across the Atlantic were purchased, rather than captured, by Europeans. Arabs, however, captured their own slaves and penetrated far deeper into Africa than Europeans dared venture, before the era of modern medicine provided the latter with some protection against the fatal tropical diseases for which they lacked biological resistance.
Now, last time I checked, those African tribes were black. Were black. So chances are that Sunny's own black ancestors, there probably are slave trade ancestors on her black side as well that she doesn't know about. So this idea that liberals and the left have when it comes to white people and Europeans and the slave trade, as if Africans weren't a part of that trade, as if African tribes didn't make money off of that trade, as if Africa didn't profit economically from that trade, is mind-boggling to me. So much so that when the Atlantic African slave trade was ended, slavery in Africa continued on the east with Arabs enslaving black people, because money was still being made and money still needed to be made, and they couldn't make it on the West Coast, so let's go to the East Coast. That's how it worked. It was economic. And by the way, slavery is not a black thing. Slavery happened across every single continent. Every race of people were either slave owners or slaves themselves. White, black, Asian, Native American. They all did it to each other. So I just think it's asinine to carry this guilt and this atonement and this disappointment because, oh my God, I have white in me. Oh my God, it's so, ugh. But I have this too. Do you not realize that if you didn't have that disgusting white side of you, you wouldn't exist? Majority of your DNA, as she said, is European. So that means that your genetic makeup, your existence, your children's existence exist because of those ancestors. And you can't tell me that every single white ancestor was a slave owner. You can't be that ignorant. Yes, I'm sure some were, because people in history did that kind of thing, unfortunately. It was an economic trade. It was something that was normal back then. Again, slavery is not something new. Slavery is not only distinguishable within the black community. It was a global, worldwide trade. And it was happening way before the transatlantic African slave trade happened. Slavery was already a thing centuries prior. So are we going to be disappointed about every single ancestor that we have? I mean, where does it end?
And emailing me and saying that I'm a white girl and that I don't deserve reparations. I still believe that
someone did that to you?
Yeah.
I don't know who sent her a thing telling her she was a white girl.
Okay, it's too much, people.
But clean off your television screen.
Yeah, that's a lot. So I still believe in reparations. I still believe this country has a lot to do in terms of racial justice. Okay. But what I will say, Sarah, to your question is that I feel that I'm enriched by knowing that history. Yeah. I'm enriched, and I'm enriched by knowing that my family has come so far from being enslavers to my mother marrying my father in 1968.
Well, yeah, that's right.
I feel enriched.
Right. You're not responsible for what they did.
Well,
Wait a minute. Did Joy just say to Sunny, you're not responsible for what they did? And Sunny nodded. Funny, because that same generosity and that same empathy isn't given to white Americans, according to Sunny and Joy and leftist brain cells. They can't comprehend that, right? It's like, no, all white people are responsible. All white people must atone. All white people must bow down and fix the past. All white people must do A, B, and C. Pay up, do this, do that. And yet, when Sunny finds out that she is majority Spanish, suddenly it's, oh, it's not your fault. You can't atone for that. It's fine. Funny how there's grace given, right? When it's for the left and when it's from their own history. But generally speaking, white people are the enemy in this country, and white people need to atone for their whiteness. Well, Sunny, when are you going to atone for your whiteness? Because according to you, you are majority white.
The can.
You're doing yours too?
Mine's in the, they're
Yours
working
is
on
in
it.
the
Yeah,
can
we
also?
shoot at the end of the year. Now Sunny's got me petrified, but
I learned a lot about my family.
I think I wasn't expecting great things going on.
I think one of the things that we should do is we should have one show that devotes to what we've discovered. I think it's important.
I don't think Sunny's ready for that type of show. This is just funny to me, man. This is just so funny to me because the amount of entitlement and ignorance wrapped up into one little gift is like the gift that keeps on giving. Thank you. Thank you, The View. Thank you. You just gave me content today. I appreciate you. It's just mind-boggling to me, like how they try to switch things up and flip the script. The fact that Sunny is so disgusted and disappointed. And I guarantee you, even if her ancestry came back as majority Spanish and her ancestors didn't have anything to do with any slave trade that happened in Europe at the time into the Caribbean, let's say her ancestors were printers and writers and they had nothing to do with the slave trade, I think she still would be disappointed if it came back that she was majority European. Because in her mind, European equals bad, equals evil, equals atonement, and all these negative connotations, and that's her mindset. That is 1000% her mindset, and that is so sad to me because we have nothing to do with our ancestors. We cannot pay the price for what our ancestors did 400 years ago. That's not on me, that's not on you, that's not on her. But the only way that you can continue this victimhood mentality that she uses all the time as the #1 race hustler right now is you have to look back to the past. You have to blame people for the actions of the past and put the blame on them today for ownership. That's the only way that reparations could work, right? You can't have people from the past who actually were the slave drivers, who actually were disgusting back then. You can't have them pay up reparations, right? Because they're dead. So let's make people who had nothing to do with that trade, with that economic trade, let's have them pay up the price and pay the piper for black people today. But of course, the irony of that is, Sunny, what are you gonna pay? Because majority of your DNA is of the oppressors. So do you get a check or are you gonna be writing a check? That's what I wanna know. And if not, why do you get a pass? Why? Why do you get a pass, but the white woman over there doesn't get a pass? Make it make sense. You can't. But what blows my mind the most, like I said earlier, is the fact that Sunny didn't know her own genetic makeup. Like, I'm Puerto Rican, and when I was like 3 years old, my dad, I remember telling me, well, not 3, but okay, maybe like 6. But I remember my dad sitting me down and telling me like, oh, you know, as a Puerto Rican, we're made up of 3 different parts. We have African blood, we have Taino Native American blood, and we have European blood, Spanish. That makes up our genetic makeup and our culture, and that's why you hear it in the music, it's in the food, it's in the way that we look. We are a triracial people. I always knew that. Always. So it's mind-boggling to me that Sunny Hostin, the educator, Sunny Hostin, the freedom fighter, Sunny Hostin, the race hustler, wouldn't know basic genetic makeup of majority of Puerto Ricans. Majority of us have a DNA that is reflective of European genetics. We just do. And a big reason for that is actually, I think it was 1813. Let me do a quick research because I remember reading up on this when I was curious about the makeup of the island of Puerto Rico, which originally was named Borinquen. That was the original name of the island. It was Borinquen, and it was populated by Taino Indians who were the Borinquen people, which is why today Puerto Ricans, we refer to ourselves as Boricuas. That is a reference to the original name of the island when it was Native American. Little tidbit for you. Okay, so let me see. Okay, I found it. So back in 1813, the country of Spain, who at the time owned and colonized Puerto Rico, they did something called the Royal Decree of Gracies. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, of 1815. And what this pretty much was an attempt by Spain to open immigration from Europe directly to the island of Puerto Rico because they were afraid at the time of the natives, the Native Americans that were living on the island and the African slaves. They were afraid of them rebelling against the Europeans, the Spanish people who were on the island, because there were more natives and Africans at the time on the island. So they wanted to pretty much balance it out and ensure that a rebellion couldn't happen. So they needed more Europeans on the island. And I'm going to read this little excerpt from the website. So on European immigration to the Caribbean, specifically Puerto Rico, what this decree did was promote Spanish immigration to the Caribbean as turmoil was bubbling in its colonies. The superpower took a huge blow, with Mexico fighting for its independence and making trade incredibly difficult. With trade throttled because of conflict, the decree was a preemptive step in other colonies. Now, the other colonies would be the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Cuba, etc. Spain updated the decree 15 years later. By this time, it had lost Mexico and news of rebellion and independence was spreading. As a result, Spain opened its doors to non-Spanish Europeans. These newcomers were promised land and rights after a few years, but they had to swear loyalty to the crown. This also meant that slave labor saw a significant bump at this time. And here's some more history. Look at this. To increase its hold on Puerto Rico and Cuba, the Spanish crown revived the Royal Decree of Gracias of 1815, intended to also attract non-Spanish Europeans, as a result of which 450,000 immigrants, mainly Spaniards, settled on the island in the period up until the American conquest. 450,000 Europeans, mostly Spaniards, and I guarantee you, majority of them were not slave masters or slave owners, Sonny. And so they did this royal decree, and a part of the decree was anybody who immigrated to Puerto Rico from Europe, had to pretty much proclaim that Spain was the ruler and that they were under Spain rule, pretty much. So even if you came from France or from some other European country, you were no longer French, you were under Spain as an immigrant into Puerto Rico. And a lot of Europeans at that time immigrated to the island. Now, prior to that, it was just Spanish and Portuguese people that were on the island, which is why majority of Puerto Ricans today have Spanish and Portuguese blood in their veins, is because they were the originators of colonization in that region. And then it wasn't until, a couple of decades later that they opened the royal decree, and a lot of people from France, from Italy, Belgium, pretty much everybody from that western area of Europe came over to Puerto Rico to enter the new world, pretty much. Which is why today, if you look at the genetic makeup of most Puerto Ricans, 60+% of our blood is European based. That wasn't by mistake. That was done on purpose when the royal decree happened in 1815. So that's something that I was educated about because I was curious, and I learned this years ago. So the fact that Sunny Hostin, this scholar of sorts in her own mind, didn't know that, was shocked that her mom's ancestry DNA derives from Europe. The fact that she didn't know that history, she said it herself, her mom has blonde hair with light eyes. What did you expect? What did you expect? There really is no excuse at this point of not knowing the history, but yet claiming to be some type of racial scholar. And you didn't even know the own history of your own people in the land that your family derives from. That's just mind-blowing to me. And I'll give you guys a perfect example. So my own DNA, let me open my DNA app really quickly. I did my DNA back in 2015, I think it was. I actually had a YouTube channel back then, an old YouTube channel, and I did my DNA reveal back then before I had my hair. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay. Oh my God, this is so freaking exciting. Okay. And my DNA, as you can see right here, 33% from where? Spain. 21% from where? Indigenous Puerto Rico. Native American. 13% Portuguese. Where's Portugal? Oh, right next to Spain. I'm shocked. 9% Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu peoples. West Africa. How did that happen? 5% Basque or Basque, and that is right next to Spain. It's in that Spanish region. And then the rest is 1%, 1%, 1%, 1%, 2% of North Africa, England, Mali, indigenous Central America, indigenous Bolivia and Peru, Jewish, Russia, the Balkans, Wales, Ireland. So I'm a mutt, okay? I am a mutt, but primarily my DNA is Spanish, Portuguese, and native Puerto Rican. And the fact that Sutton didn't realize that that is the normal genetic makeup of most Puerto Ricans. I mean, the fact that Spain and Portugal was like, what? Huh? How did that happen? How did you not know? So yeah, let this be a lesson to everyone that you can't just take someone's word for it just because they say that they're a scholar or they're some type of activist, because clearly Sunny Hostin has very limited knowledge of her own genetic makeup, of her own self. And yet here she is trying to be an advocate for reparations and for atonement when half of her family, according to her, should be atoning. Oh, the irony. Oh, the irony. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this topic, what you think of this story. Did you laugh like I did? Because I know I was having the time of my life last night when I saw this video drop. Wow. Now that's entertainment. If you enjoy my content, please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit my notification bell so you know when I post a brand new video. I am also available on all social media platforms, including X, Instagram, and TikTok under CurlyBoyChuck. I'll see you there. Peace.